None of this lines up. None of this lines up. None of that lines up. I'm so over this project.
I'm originally South African. Our three major sports are cricket, rugby, and soccer. A sport that isn't on that list is Australian rules football, more commonly known as AFL. And this video is what that $50 million industry taught me about making furniture. Stick with me. But before we get into that fascinating tangent, let me explain this client commission. And for that, we'll need to go back in time to past Robin.
I was referred to this client by Studio Doubled, who I talked about extensively in the last video. This particular client had some floodwater come through her house earlier in the year, and it just trashed her barroom. And I was standing in the room looking around and suddenly realized there's mold on every single surface in this room. So she was putting through an insurance claim and needed to get the bar rebuilt, and that's where I came in. She just wanted a like-for-like replacement, and the original bar was quite functional, so this made the whole designing and quoting process quite straightforward. So we worked out all the details over the coming weeks, made sure that the quote was correct. She sent that off to the insurance company, they stamped it okay, and then she was able to get the money and put in the deposit to lock me in. Does anyone else struggle with the anxiety around making that first cut in a project? This bar is going to have a huge Essendon Bombers logo attached to it. This client is a massive footy fan, and his entire bar room is going to be dedicated to his favorite team. Dan from Riverside Woodworks is making the sign, but we'll get to that a bit later on. So a South African travels to Australia and moves into a house with an ex-footy player. I was told that one of the bylaws of said house was that the footy would be on TV on weekends, and that was the end of the discussion. And so to integrate into this new culture, I decided to give this strange sport a go. Actually, I'm in the tropics. It's way too hot for this. Have you actually watched footy without knowing what's going on? As a foreigner, it looks like chaos. None of the movements make sense. People are punching at balls, random, and it seems like there's just no structure. But there is. I just hadn't learned the rules yet. That is it for day one. So far, I've managed to cut this angled piece, and I've also cut the 3 vertical pieces. Now, that doesn't seem like a lot for half a day's work, but this is the beginning stage of the project. So I'm figuring out a lot of things about, if I do X down the line, how's that going to affect Y? So there's a lot of that going on. As the days progress, it should get a little bit faster. I'll be honest, the first few months were tough. But of course that's how it starts. When you know none of the rules of the game, you have all the rules to learn. My housemate was a legend, and I think he kind of enjoyed the challenge of teaching me. Every weekend we'd sit down and watch the game, and he'd repeat the same things over and over again, and slowly I started to recognize the patterns. I certainly wasn't fluent, but I felt a little more confident. I'm finding that now I'm sort of into the flow of things. Everything starts moving a lot quicker, and my decisions become a lot quicker, and I'm suddenly making more parts for this a lot quicker than I was yesterday.
And then the client did something odd.
Last week, the client paid me the full amount. I think she did that to try and keep me involved because this has gone over a couple months now, so she wanted to make sure she pays me an income, so I'm getting paid some money, so good on her for that. But now that I have all the money, my enthusiasm has dropped, which is dumb because I haven't given the product over yet. But it's this, I guess this is this weird psychological thing where the carrot's gone, so the drive goes with it. At this stage, I would say I'm about halfway through this build, but I had a call to ask me if I want to take on some new work, making some of these boxes, and this is a job that I just can't turn down. There are up to 14 of these boxes. It's made of silky oak, glass on the top, plywood on the back. This is the original prototype that they use, so I'm really just going to be able to build it off this. Because of the type of work that it is, it should be quite easy to batch this out and complete it relatively quickly. I have a 3-week deadline, so I'm going to squeeze this in between the bar build. Back to the metaphor. One of the reasons footy is so difficult to follow is that it has its own set of rules, and sometimes they're very nuanced. If you can understand a marking contest, only then do you see the push in the back. But before that, even though you think you know what's going on, you're actually missing a really big part of the game. And that only starts to make sense with experience. I've just picked up the glass, so this is 4mm glass. I'm using a 4mm bit on the router, but unfortunately, it doesn't fit. But that's okay, this is all part of the learning experience. I now know that if I'm going to use 4mm glass, I need to go for like a 5mm router bit. One of the things I'm having to think about all the time is where I put these panels, because it's not a case of, oops, it's fallen on the floor, that'll buff out. If I lose track of this and it hits the floor, it is game over for that panel. The boxes are all done. I'm just letting them air out a little bit more just because the oil's slightly tacky, but they are basically done and ready. The client is coming tomorrow to collect them. So the last thing I'm going to do from here is pack them up, get them ready to go, and then this job will be done.
Okay, so looking at the numbers for this job, I worked a total of 27 hours. Unlike most projects where I quote according to how long I think the project will take, for this one, I used the price that the client paid last year, which was $200 per box. My expenses were just over $400, and taking that out of the $2,800 income, I was left with around $2,300 of profit. This meant that I was working for $87.50 per hour. That's lower than my $100 an hour target, but it's close enough that I'm still happy that I took on this project. And because this is an annual project, I've potentially secured work for next year, and that is worth a lot.
And now with those little boxes done, I can get back onto the bar.
Which involved a lot of cutting and screwing, and this is where we enter the persistence phase. If you're going to master a skill, you're expected to put in 10,000 hours. So let's say you just want to be kinda good, you're still looking at a mean average of 4,000 to 6,000 hours. That's 200 days. Luckily, the footy season lasts 7 months, so I had plenty of weekends to practice. And now, 12 years later and a lot of hours under the belt, I feel like I have a much better handle on the game. Putting that kind of time into something is hard work. And hard work can be a pain in the dick. No! And yes, watching hours of footy on a Saturday with a beer in your hand might not be what some people class as hard work. When it comes to making furniture, it's a different story.
This project is really testing my mental capacity to stick with it, because my workshop is just chockers full of this bar, and it's making it really difficult to work in here. And I'm trying to constantly remind myself, like, this is the dream, you've made it, this is what you wanted. But in projects like this where it's difficult to work, it's hard to keep that positive mindset. Now you may notice I have this massive, as my daughter would say, gap running along here. And I always knew that that was probably going to happen, because trying to maneuver this big piece of timber and get that join to be perfect was never going to happen. So to get around this, I've now put the two halves together so they screw together as tight as they can be. I'm now going to take a straight edge and then run a router bit just wider than this gap all the way through. That'll give me a nice consistent 6mm gap. I can then take a piece of solid timber and glue that to one of the tops. So then when it comes together, it will make up that gap perfectly and uniformly. One of the features of this bar, I need this to be able to come apart and go back together. Hopefully this will work. Moment of truth, I've just cut this box out to hopefully match that box. Let's see if it fits. This is the bit that I've been stressing about the most on this project. And then after years of following the one same team to the point where you are unnecessarily invested in their success, you watch them finally do well in a season. You're nervously optimistic that this will be the year they go to the finals. This will be the year that they put on their big boy pants and get the job done. And the big day comes, it's the grand final. And then you watch them get destroyed. And it feels like shit. These points don't match. I've got to cut this off. It's fairly straightforward. None of this lines up. None of this lines up. None of that lines up. Alright, I am back. I have sorted myself out and got through the majority of this trim work. There's just a few more pieces left to go. This took me about 3 or 4 days to do. Very tedious, not particularly enjoyable, but I actually think it's starting to look pretty cool at this point. I've got 3 main jobs left to do, the first of which I'm going to do next, which is setting up for some big posters, adding some frames for them to slot into, and getting the big Essendon sign attached to the front. This is the main focus of the bar, the main focal point, so it's got to look good. And just like that, it's a new day, it's a new season, and you get back into it. This project really had me questioning my life decisions and had me wondering if I should have gone with a different career path. But there's something about sticking with the same team, even through the hard times, that adds meaning. I won't always be kicking goals, but I think rising above the losses is what gives value to the wins.
In those last few days, I was finishing up all the small touches that really brought this bar to life. It was at this stage that I was really getting excited to see the tail end of this project and getting half my workshop back.
Alright, that's the first coat done. I absolutely hate staining timber for 2 reasons. Firstly, I think you get really good at it over time. I'm not very good at it yet. But secondly, I just feel like this is not the color of the timber. It's not brown timber. Why are we making it brown? And then you end up with that stain just highlighting every minor defect. Any little scratch or anything just instantly becomes dark. And then you end up with timber that looks old. It just looks dated now. Oh, I don't like it. Okay, the bar is all done. Everything is where it should be. I've got the posters up. I've got the feet ready for the big Essendon sign that Dan from Riverside Woodworks is going to supply. All of the finish has been gone over just to make sure that it's all good. Next up is delivery. Right, so Dan has just pitched up. We've got the sign. This is the first time both of us are actually going to see it on the bar. Once we know this fits, then we can head off for delivery.
Dan's doing a whole video on this sign and how we made it. Depending on when you're watching this, his video may or may not be ready, but if it is, I'll link to it. Go check it out.
Just got to the client's place now. Luckily, there's some access around the side. Yes, I know. Oops, wrong way. I can't see the trailer, so just let me know if I'm going to hit something.
No, you're good. You've got plenty of space.
Okay, let's do this.
For all the upset that this bar caused me, it was pretty cool seeing it in place and seeing the client's reaction to it. From their perspective, their old bar had been removed months ago, and then a brand new shiny bar had just suddenly turned up. There was no working out tricky angles. There was no worrying about deadlines. There was just a brand new bar, and they were stoked. So I was stoked. I've got an upcoming video where I talk about this more, but the TLDR is that furniture makers tend to obsess over small issues, whereas clients get to enjoy the big picture. After the delivery, I got home to an empty workshop, and it felt great. Let's get to the numbers. Well, towards the end of the project, I kind of stopped counting my hours, but I've got a rough idea. My income and expenses were as expected. Thankfully, I didn't overspend on materials. This next bit surprised me. At the end of a project, I will calculate the time that I've spent by adding up the minutes that I've put on the wall. I generally won't even think about calculating it until I'm doing the video. In this case, I stopped counting towards the end of the project, so I had to come up with a rough estimate of the time I hadn't recorded. And adding that to the time I had recorded got me 35 hours. I'd forgotten what I'd allocated to this project, but when I went back and had a look at my notes, I saw that I'd allocated 30 hours. So while it felt like I'd lost all direction towards the end, I actually hadn't gone that far over time. So when I take the profit of $3,130 and divide that by the 35 hours, I come up with an hourly rate of just under $90. I like to aim for $100 an hour, but while I didn't reach that, I was expecting it to be way worse. I hope you enjoyed the video. Go check out Dan's video, and I will see you guys in the next one.
Oh.